You know what I really love about the internet? What I really love about the internet is that when you shoot targets far away, right, and they can like hear it, they're like, oh, you can't confirm the distance. And then when you show a sign that shows the distance, they're like, there's no way that's correct. That's way too close. What the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, walk? God, slant brakes suck. Runs good. What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel again. Now, this is the DDI AK. Okay. Now, there have been actually quite a few people talking about DDI and the quality of the rifles and stuff like that. A lot of guys are starting to pick them up. This rifle was picked up and then sent to me by my buddy Alex, and it was essentially a new rifle when it arrived to me. It had something like 500-ish rounds through it. Now, as far as yet another American company getting into the AK game, everyone's going to sit there and ask, well, you know, do they stack up? Do they build proper guns? Well, I'm going to throw out a few points here, and we're going to see and you guys can go ahead and come to your own conclusion based on either what you watched or the other research that you've done. So, you know, we're going to go ahead and check out this rifle starting up front. Now, it comes with a standard AK47 style front sight tower. Nothing too special about it. I will say this, for a brand new gun, it didn't take an incredible amount of effort to adjust the irons on it. So kudos to them. There are definitely some arsenals that I've had to throw like all of my body weight plus a cow's into adjusting those sights to basically just kind of break them loose from all of that, from whatever it is kept to keep the corrosion out of them. Okay, it ships with a standard slant brake. Okay, and it does its job. It overcompensates a lot. Okay, Now, it does come with a cleaning rod. This one in this rifle, now I might be different, but this one in this rifle was very loose, and it just kind of flopped around in there and made noise, right? Personally, I don't care at all about cleaning rods. I just remove them, and they're not a big deal to me. But it's just a little nitpicky thing that that I figured I would mention. Speaking of nitpicking, okay, they decided to use a 45-degree gas block. Now, why that is, I'm not exactly sure, but there's a particular reason why the Russians and Arsenal and Rifle Dynamics use 90-degree gas blocks. Okay, for one, it is a little more even as far as distribution of gases or introduction of gases into your piston. And number two, it wears less on the part or the gas block itself, right? Now, is this a really big issue? No, it's really not, okay? My Mac 90 has tens of thousands of rounds through it, and it's getting ready to get rebarreled, and it runs the same gas block, so it's not really a huge deal, okay? Now, in case I didn't mention it yet, this is the Hungarian kit. This is a Hungarian Kit gun, and it is a stamped gun as well. So it's a little bit lighter than their milled offerings and stuff, and this is where we get a little scared, okay? Because milled guns are a little harder to screw up than stamped guns. That's why the first AKs that were fielded, were milled guns, but, not to go off on a tangent there, but I figured it would be worth mentioning this is one of their stamped guns, okay? It also ships with Magpul furniture. Now, as far as the handguards are concerned, they're very reminiscent of Galil handguards, only they're better because they vent heat a little more efficiently, and it keeps your hands just a little bit farther away from the hot things. It's not really that big of it's not that big of a deal to fire 2 or 3 or 4 magazines back to back and then hang on to the handguard of your rifle. Those of you that shoot AKs a lot will know that these guys heat up fairly quickly. So that's a pretty good, it's a pretty good set of handguards. The rest of the Magpul furniture runs just fine, but I will place a caveat on this by saying whatever it is that, or whatever condition it is that this stock arrives to you, remove it, throw some thread locker in it, and same for your pistol grip. Okay, this guy didn't come loose on me, but the stock did. Both screws that held this in place, the top and the internal screw, did start to back off on me, and that was as the rifle arrived shipped. So pay attention to that, because these were kits that were put together by DDI, and I understand it getting through DDI's QC without being looked at too hard as far as the stocks are concerned, but Magpul also had to ship these to DDI. Now, the screw that holds the stock in place this away, or that's going this away, had like a single drop and not enough of thread locker on the screw. It didn't go all the way around on the threads, and I guess that was partially why it started to back out, and the top screw had none. So back both of those out, put Loctite on them, and put them back in before you mess with this rifle. Okay, same thing for the pistol grip, just to be safe. Okay, now, moving on to the meat and potatoes of this review. Okay, we are going to go ahead and rip this rifle apart, and we're going to check something out. Alright guys, so we got it pulled apart, and I got the rifle cleaned up so that you guys could see exactly where the wear patterns are and all of that. There isn't a huge layer of carbon on top of the moving parts. And I will say this, okay, when we're looking at parts and trying to determine how worn they are, what you really need to look at, instead of, for instance, the finish that's getting scraped off, and I'm going to try and focus this really quick. There we go. Instead of looking at the finish that's being scraped off and be like, oh my god, the thing's being eaten up, instead look at the metal itself, okay? Because when we look at the metal itself, you can see, okay, yeah, there's definitely some polishing going on here, and there's definitely some wear as far as the parts are, as far as the finish is concerned, I'm sorry. But look at the metal itself. Is it scooping itself out? Okay, for instance, in this. No, it's actually smooth, and you can actually see there, as I rotate it over, it doesn't look as if it's divoting or digging out a little trench there, which is good because you can see that the parts aren't eating themselves to death, right? So we're looking at bolt lugs and stuff here, and we're looking at wear area and stuff like that. So as far as bolt lugs and stuff, I can only really see one little burr in here. It's actually fairly common in a lot of kits and on a lot of bolts. So that guy's not that big a deal, but you can actually see, you know, there's a difference. There's a little burr, and there's all the other, or the rest of the bolt, right? So that's not really getting worn too bad. And of course, we look at our bolt face. There's no cracking or heavy burring or anything like that. Now, when we look at our bolt carrier, right, we can see more of the same. Only difference here being that there's pretty much no burring or anything like that on the inside. Okay. Operating rod's got the same wear that any other good quality AK would have, and there's no huge burrs. Running up to the piston itself, and again, more polishing, no burrs, no trench digging, no metal removal, none of that. So, good to go, right? As far as removing parts are concerned, good. I'm not very concerned at all. Looking at the inside, we can see that the hammer itself is getting polished pretty good. You can see our ejector, basically, it's a squared type though, not a hook type. That's a little odd. Not in a bad way, it's just, okay, I'm not used to seeing that. You know, as far as AK type rifles or AKMs, I'm used to seeing a little hooked ejector rather than a squared one. But you can see that it's not getting beaten to death either. Okay. Trunnion isn't all beat to hell. Bead ramp's good, chamber area is good. So basically we can see, you know, as far, except for the finish, the rifle is pretty much unaffected by 2,000 rounds of high volume fire. Great, fantastic. There's a caveat to this though. Before this rifle got to me, it was shipped out of the factory with a problem. Okay, the dovetail here had to be heat treated again. It was mushrooming real bad after the first couple hundred rounds. But I will tell you this about DDI: when Alex had to send back his bolt carrier to get it heat treated and whatnot, they had it back to him inside of a week. Okay, and as we can see, it isn't mushrooming or turning itself into a tack or anything like that. So not only did they rectify the problem, they rectified the problem within a business week. That's outstanding customer service. That's outstanding attention to customers as well. Because a dude brought up a problem, they took that problem, fixed that problem, and returned his part to him inside a week. That's good to go. Okay. So as far as the functionality of the parts and stuff like that, great. It works, it will cycle, and it won't eat itself. Like, for instance, a RAS-47 will. Now, moving on to just performance. Okay, now, as far as performance is concerned, this rifle ships with a side mount here, which is good, because if you get yourself an RS Regulate mount or something, you can go ahead and toss a mount, the mount and an optic on top of this rifle very easily. So it provides you the provisions that you need to either go straight to shooting it a whole lot, or do your very best to tailor it to your specific needs. So really it's not that big of a deal. Now, here's the thing. They ship with Green Mountain barrels, and what's crazy about Green Mountain barrels is that they actually provide a pretty serious degree of accuracy. Now, these Green Mountain barrels are not chrome lined like a traditional cold hammer forged barrel would be. And they're not cold hammer forged. So, with that being said, right, what's the performance of the barrel? Well, with my own personal use and by basically calling around or talking to guys that own the DDI barrels and stuff like that, what we're looking at together is somewhere between 1.5 to 2 inch grooves. There are some guys that say that they have even tighter shot groups with their barrels, which is good. What I had was somewhere between 1.2 to 1.5 inches at 100 yards, which is great because it's well within rifleman grade accuracy. Okay, what you are probably going to expect out of your barrel life, that is probably somewhere between 10 to 15,000 rounds. Now, that is a little bit, it's something that I would worry about, but it wouldn't be something that I would be worried about immediately. And replacement barrels for AKs are not incredibly expensive. The only thing is that you need to send them to people that know what they're doing, because switching out an AK barrel is not the same as switching out an AR barrel. It's much harder. Okay, so that's the cold hard truth on their barrels. They perform really well, but it's not a Chinese Norinco Mac 90 barrel in that you're just not going to get the same round count out of it. That being said, though, it does shoot a little bit straighter. So, you're going to have to weigh the cost of a barrel and weigh the cost of the a little bit of extra performance. But, that's going to be your choice as far as what is more important to you. Is it more important to have extra barrel longevity, or do you want a barrel that has slightly better performance and that you can get something like 10 to 15,000 rounds out of? Now, if it were me and if this was my rifle, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. When I shoot it out, and then I replace the barrel. It's not that big of a deal. It's already paid for itself as far as, just the accuracy that you gain out of it and the consistent performance that you get out of it. Because I'm telling you right now, chrome lining isn't always the most consistent in barrels and whatnot. And the more that they're used, you can get shifts, especially if a chrome lining is inconsistent on the inside of a barrel. So what's neat about their finish on the inside of their barrels is that it's a finicide coating. It's applied with a gas, and what's neat about that is that it's applied very evenly. It's a very well done process, and as far as execution is concerned, they yield a very large amount of real accurate and consistent guns. So I got to take my hat off to them for that. It's just, I kind of wish it was a chrome cold hammer forged barrel. I would definitely get more life out of it. So you're gonna have to make a choice as to whether or not that's a huge deal for you. Now, the next thing that we're gonna go into here is on reliability. Now, it's an AK, right? An AK is an AK. It's reliable. No, it's not. No, an AK is not an AK. There are good ones and there are really bad ones. Okay. What I am happy to say is that this has been a reliable rifle. What I will also say, though, is that I'm pretty sure it's ammunition dependent, because there was a big old hodgepodge of stuff in here. But I had a failure to fire and a failure to, not extract, but eject. Okay. So, inside of 2,000 rounds, I had 2 stoppages, and I'm pretty sure it was ammo related, because some of the stuff that I shot through this was really old. You could tell just because it was just fanning it everywhere, and that's usually an ammunition type deal, when it's just very inconsistently tossing it brass all over the place. As far as reliability is concerned, also, as far as the longevity of your parts, what I think is outstanding is that this is not like a lot of commercial AKs on the market, in that it isn't horribly overgassed. Most commercial AKs are. Now, well, why is that a big deal? That would just put a little more power into the working parts and it would yield a reliable product. Well, yes, it would yield a product that would cycle. It would yield a product that would cycle reliably. It would also yield a product that wore its parts out much faster, another thing that the RAS-47 and the C-39s suffer from. And in all honesty, it doesn't need to be there. What the dudes at DDI decided that they were going to do is that they were going to go against a commercial AK grain and spec their barrels to tap off the necessary amount of gas to cycle the action reliably, just like the original AKs, or the original Russian AKs, and the current ones too. Okay, so they are using the proper amount of gas, or proper diameter gas ports in their barrels to cycle their actions. Now, this is going to translate into two things. One, it's going to translate into a smoother cycling gun. The second thing is that it's not going to beat the bejesus out of your parts, which is great. It's all good stuff. So, assuming, and this is assuming, okay, that DDI keeps up the work that they are doing, and assuming that they consistently apply the same techniques and yield the same product over and over and over, this looks like a company that you can really side with. Now, one more issue that I'm going to go over is that because this is a stamped gun, you obviously have to deal with whether or not you have a cast trunnion or a forged trunnion. Now, from the word go, DDI was using forged front trunnions and cast rears. They got some flack for using the cast rears, but some of the best people in the industry will look at cast rear trunnions and say, it can be a problem, but you need a lot of mileage on it. It's the front trunnions that are the most concern. Even still, DDI decided that, you know what, no, we're not going to mess with the cast thing. We're just gonna forge rear trunnions. So I'm not aware if those AKs are circulating about in the market yet. But what I do understand is that they're going through the processes required to do that. So again, I guess we'll see as far as later on with future guns and stuff like that. But it seems as though they're really standing by their products and they're really listening to customer input. Quite unlike the dudes at IO that try to compare their guns to stuff like Arsenal AKs, and it's just it's absolutely false, So any issues that customers have with their guns, they will address. If you have a personal issue with your gun, they will fix it. Okay, which is great. So in all reality, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to recommend that this rifle is good to go and that you should go ahead and get it, especially if it's your first AK. But what I'm also going to say is that because they're fairly new, monitor them. Okay? If you buy your rifle from them, make sure it's good to go. Cycle it, do a bunch of shooting with it, make sure that that nothing weird is happening, make sure that your sights aren't canted and all kinds of weird stuff like that. And pay attention to other people that get their AKs from them. Over time, you never know. They could just continue and make great AKs, and that's the end of it. They could also tank and start producing crap. So, it is what it is. But, for now, I'm giving these guys a good to go. Okay? Go ahead and get this rifles from DDI. They're milled or they're stamped, because I have not yet heard of any serious issues. Yes, this rifle had an issue. It was fixed inside of a week. And what's crazy to me is that a lot of guys will write off companies just because they have a problem with their gun. I try my very best to allow a company to make it right. And they did. So that I don't even have an issue with those guys. Like, none at all. Fixing all of that inside of a week, when with some of these companies you cannot get them to agree that there is a problem. That's friggin' awful. So go ahead and get it. It's accurate, it's reliable, and it's not made out of some crazy freaking spec so you can get standard AK furniture for it. So, good to go. But that's it for me, guys. Remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.